The metallic snap cut through my headset before the screen even went black. 1 second I was mid-sentence, locked into a secure call, and the next, silence. No signal. No backup. Just a dead line where there should never be one. I froze, staring at the blinking cursor like it might come back on its own. It didn't. Something was very wrong. I yanked off the headset and rushed to the window. My porch light spilled across the driveway, and that's when I saw her. Maggie Holloway. HOA president. Standing right next to my utility box with a pair of bolt cutters hanging loose in her hand. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. Just that same tight smile, like she'd finally fixed something that bothered her. The night air smelled like hot plastic and cut insulation. My internet line lay slack against the siding, cleanly severed. Too clean. That wasn't an accident. I stepped outside, gravel crunching under my boots, and the cold hit my face hard. "You can't have that exposed wiring," she said, like she was commenting on lawn height. Calm. Certain. Wrong. I opened my mouth to respond, but my phone buzzed first. One vibration. Then another. Then it wouldn't stop. I glanced down. No caller ID. Just a red notification I had never seen before. Not once. Not in years. That's when my stomach dropped. Because that line she cut wasn't just internet. I looked back up at her, still standing there, still holding the cutters, completely unaware of what she'd just touched. The street was quiet. Too quiet. No cars. No movement. Like the whole block was holding its breath. Another buzz hit my phone. Then another. The kind of alert that doesn't ask for attention. It demands it. I didn't answer her. I didn't argue. I just stepped back and watched. Because something had already been set in motion. And it was moving fast. Faster than she could imagine. Somewhere far away, systems were reacting. Signals rerouting. Flags getting raised. You could feel it in the silence. Like pressure building behind a locked door. Maggie shifted her weight, glancing at me like she expected a thank you. She had no idea. None. My phone screen lit up again, brighter this time, and I saw the timestamp. Less than a minute. That's all it took. I slowly exhaled, eyes still on her, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't going to stay between neighbors. Not even close. A low engine hum rolled into the street from somewhere beyond the corner, deep and controlled, not like anything that usually passed through this neighborhood. Maggie turned her head slightly, just enough to notice the sound, but not enough to understand it. Not yet. I did not move when the engine sound got closer. It was not loud. It was controlled, steady, like something that did not need attention to own the space. Maggie took a small step back from the utility box, brushing her hands like she had just finished yard work. "You are welcome," she said, casual, almost proud. I did not answer. My phone buzzed again, sharper this time, and the screen flashed a system prompt I had only seen in training environments. Priority escalation. That was not normal. Not for a residential line. Not for anything in this neighborhood. The air felt different, like pressure before a storm. I glanced down the street. 2 black SUVs turned the corner in perfect sync, headlights low, engines barely audible. They did not speed. They did not hesitate. They just arrived. Maggie squinted, confused, like she was trying to place a memory that did not belong here. "Are those for you?" she asked, half joking. I still did not answer. My chest felt tight, not from panic, but from recognition. This was moving faster than expected. Much faster. I slipped my phone into my pocket and took a step away from the cut cable. There was nothing to fix right now. Not like this. Not anymore. The first SUV rolled to a stop in front of my driveway. Doors opened in sequence. No rush. No wasted motion. 3 men stepped out, dressed plain, but everything about them said they were not from around here. Clean lines. Focused eyes. The kind of presence that does not ask questions first. Maggie straightened her posture. Her tone shifted instantly. "Excuse me, this is a private community," she said, voice firm, rehearsed. It sounded like something she had said 100 times before. It did not land the same now. One of the men glanced at her, just once, then looked past her straight at me. That was enough. He already knew. That should not have been possible. I felt that detail settle in my mind like a weight. They knew exactly where to go. No hesitation. No checking addresses. That meant the alert had already mapped everything. Faster than I thought. Maggie stepped slightly in front of the path, still holding those cutters, like they gave her authority. "You cannot just come in here," she added, a little louder. Her voice had that edge now. Not fear. Not yet. Just resistance. The man in front did not raise his voice. He did not even slow down. "Ma'am, step aside," he said. Simple. Direct. Final. She hesitated for half a second. That was all it took for the shift to happen. You could feel it. That moment when control changes hands and one side does not realize it yet. My phone vibrated again, softer this time, like confirmation instead of warning. I pulled it out and glanced down. The connection status had not returned, but something else had. A secure channel request. Incoming. That should not be happening without the line. Unless the system had already rerouted through a backup I did not even know was active. That thought hit hard. There was more tied to that cable than I had been told. Maggie finally stepped aside, just enough to clear the path. Her smile was gone now. Replaced with something tighter. Uncertain. One of the men paused near the cut line, crouched down, and studied it for a second longer than necessary. Not confused. Not surprised. Just confirming. That silence stretched longer than it should have. Too deliberate. Too focused. Then he stood up and looked directly at Maggie, not at the cutters, not at the cable, but at her. Like he already knew the answer before asking the question. That was when I realized this was not just about a damaged connection anymore. Something much bigger had just been triggered, and it was already unfolding faster than anyone here could stop it. And Maggie was still trying to understand why they were here. The man did not ask what happened to the cable. He already knew. You could see it in the way his eyes moved from the cut line to Maggie's hand, then back to her face. No hesitation. No confusion. Just quiet confirmation. Maggie shifted again, gripping the cutters tighter like they still meant something. "I was fixing a violation," she said, voice steady but thinner now. That line was not approved by the HOA guidelines. The words sounded smaller in the air than they did in her head. One of the men reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, no bigger than a phone. He held it near the severed cable without touching it. A faint tone pulsed once. Then again. Not loud. Not random. Measured. He glanced at the others. That was enough. No one explained what the device was. No one needed to. I felt a slow realization settle deeper in my chest. This was not just a response. This was verification. Maggie let out a short laugh, like she was trying to reset the moment. "If this is about property access, I can show you the bylaws," she said. Her voice carried that same practiced authority, but it did not reach anyone this time. The man closest to her finally spoke again. "Ma'am, what time did you cut that line?" His tone did not change. It did not rise. But the question landed heavy. Maggie blinked once. Then twice. Around. I do not know, maybe 5 minutes ago, she said. She glanced at me, expecting something. Maybe support. Maybe resistance. I gave her neither. My phone buzzed again in my hand. I looked down. The secure channel request was still there. Waiting. That should not have been possible without a connection. Unless the system had already rerouted through a protected network I did not have access to. That detail hit harder than anything so far. There were layers here I had never seen. The man nodded slightly, then spoke into a small earpiece. He did not say much. Just a timestamp. A location code. That was it. The kind of message that carried more weight than words. Maggie's eyes followed the movement, her confidence slipping 1 inch at a time. Is there a problem? She asked. This time, the question was real. No performance. No control. Just a crack. The second SUV door opened, and another person stepped out. Different posture. Different energy. He walked slower, scanning the area once before focusing. On the cable. Then on me. That look lingered for a second longer than it should have. Recognition again. Not of me personally, but of what I was tied to. That was when the weight of it settled fully. I was not the center of this. The system was. And it was already in motion. The new arrival stopped near the others and spoke quietly. No names. No explanations. Just short phrases that did not belong in a neighborhood like this. Maggie took a step back without realizing it. The gravel shifted under her heel. The cutters lowered slightly. For the first time since I had seen her, she looked unsure of where to stand. The man with the device turned it off and slipped it away. Confirmed, he said. One word. Clean. Final. It echoed louder than it should have in the still air. My phone screen changed again. The secure request updated. Authentication pending. That meant the system was not just reacting. It was escalating. Maggie's voice came out softer now. I did not damage anything important, she said. Not to them. To herself. The man closest to her met her eyes. No anger. No judgment. Just clarity. That line is not governed by your association, he said. Each word landed slow. Measured. It is not residential infrastructure. Maggie's lips parted slightly. No words came out. The silence stretched again, thicker this time. The kind that presses in on you. I could hear my own breathing. Steady. Controlled. But louder than before. The distant hum of the engines did not fade. It stayed constant, like a reminder that this moment was not temporary. The man took one small step closer to her. Not aggressive. Just enough to shift the space. We need you to come with us to clarify a few details, he said. Maggie looked down at the cutters in her hand, then back at the cable on the ground. For the first time, she saw it differently. Not as a violation. Not as a fix. Something else. Something she could not undo. I felt the shift fully settle in that moment. This was no longer about rules or appearances. It had crossed into something she could not control. And the system was only just beginning to respond. Maggie did not move when he asked her to come with them. She just stood there, staring at the cable like it had changed shape. The cutters slipped slightly in her hand. The metal tapped against her ring with a small, sharp sound. It echoed more than it should have. I am not going anywhere, she said, but the certainty was gone. It came out thinner, like she was testing the words instead of believing them. The man did not react. He did not repeat himself. He simply waited. That silence pressed in harder than any argument. I stayed where I was, a few steps back, watching it unfold. My phone buzzed again. I glanced down. Authentication in progress. The words were steady, but the signal bar was still empty. That made no sense. Unless the connection had shifted somewhere I could not see. A layer deeper. Maggie took a slow breath and straightened her shoulders. You cannot just show up here and start making demands, she said. This is a private community. She said it again, like repeating it might bring her control back. One of the men near the SUV looked up from a tablet I had not noticed before. His fingers moved once across the screen. Then he stopped. This property falls within our jurisdiction under specific conditions, he said, calm and flat. Those conditions have just been triggered. Maggie blinked at him. That was not the response she expected. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Something was slipping, and she could feel it. The man closest to the cable turned slightly toward me. Are you able to confirm loss of service at exactly 2142? He asked. His tone was direct, but not aggressive. It felt procedural. I nodded once. Yes, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He gave a short nod back and spoke quietly into his earpiece again. Another timestamp. Another code. The system was building something. Piece by piece. Maggie looked between us, her eyes narrowing. What is he talking about? She asked. This time, the question was pointed at me. I held her gaze for a second, then looked past her at the cut line. That connection does not run through your board, I said. Simple. True. Not enough. She shook her head immediately. Everything in this neighborhood runs through the HOA, she said. Everything. The word hung there, heavy and wrong. One of the men exhaled slowly, almost like he had heard that sentence too many times before. He stepped closer to the utility box and pointed at a small, barely visible marking near the conduit. That marking indicates restricted infrastructure, he said. It is not subject to residential governance. Maggie leaned forward slightly, squinting at the spot. She had never noticed it. Of course she had not. It was not meant for her. My phone vibrated again. The screen shifted. Authentication complete. The message appeared clean and sharp, like it had always been there. A secure line re-established without the physical cable. That meant the system had fully rerouted. Automatically. Instantly. I felt a quiet shift settle inside me. This was bigger than I thought. Much bigger. Maggie saw the change in my face. She caught that detail. What did you just do? She asked, sharper now. There it was again. That need to assign control. I shook my head slightly. Nothing, I said. Because it was true. I had not done anything. That was the part she could not process. The man with the tablet looked up again. We have confirmation of interference with a protected channel, he said. Sequence aligns with physical disruption at this location. Maggie's shoulders stiffened. Interference, she repeated. The word sounded foreign coming out of her mouth. I cut a wire, she said. That is all. The man met her eyes. That wire was part of an active network, he said. One that does not tolerate interruption. The phrasing was careful. Deliberate. It carried weight without raising volume. Maggie's grip on the cutters loosened. They slipped from her hand and dropped onto the gravel with a dull thud. No one moved to pick them up. No one needed to. The moment had already shifted past that. A faint breeze moved through the street, carrying the smell of insulation and cold air. It felt sharper now. Cleaner. Like something had been stripped away. The man closest to her gestured lightly toward the SUV. We need to continue this conversation in a controlled setting, he said. Maggie did not argue this time. She just looked at the cable one more time, then at me. There was something different in her eyes now. Not anger. Not even fear. Just confusion. Deep and growing. Like she had stepped into something she could not map. I stood there, phone in hand, watching the system settle into its new state. Stable. Secure. Untouched by the damage she thought she caused. And that was the detail that stayed with me. Because if the line could recover that fast without me, then it was never just mine to begin with. And whatever she interrupted, was still running somewhere else. Maggie hesitated 1 second too long, and that was all it took. The man closest to her did not raise his voice again. He simply turned slightly, and the others adjusted without a word. It was subtle, but the space around her shifted. Controlled. Closed. Not aggressive, just final. Maggie swallowed, her eyes darting from the SUV to the cable, then back to me like I was supposed to explain this. I did not. My phone screen stayed steady in my hand. Secure connection active. No signal bars. No visible network. Still running. That detail kept pulling at my thoughts. Something deeper was carrying the load now. Something I had never been shown. Maggie took a small step toward the sidewalk, then stopped. I need to call my attorney, she said. The words came out fast, like she had finally found something familiar to hold on to. One of the men gave a slight nod. You will have that opportunity, he said. Calm. Neutral. No resistance. But no delay either. Maggie glanced down at the cutters on the ground, then quickly away. She did not reach for them. Not anymore. That part of her authority was gone. The man with the tablet moved closer to the utility box again, his eyes scanning the conduit line like he was reading something invisible. His fingers tapped once across the screen. Then he paused. There is a secondary channel, he said quietly. That caught my attention. Secondary meant redundancy. Redundancy meant planning. But I had never set that up. Not on my side. I felt a slow chill settle in. The system was more layered than I thought. Maggie looked at him, confused. What does that even mean? She asked. Her voice cracked slightly at the end. He did not answer her. He was not here for explanations. The man nearest to me shifted his focus back in my direction. Your system has re-established through a protected relay, he said. You should not experience further disruption. His tone was factual, like he was reading a report. I nodded slowly, but inside, that only raised more questions. If the system could recover that fast, then the physical line was not the primary path. It was just the visible one. The easy target. Maggie wrapped her arms around herself, a small motion, almost unnoticed. The night air had gotten colder, or maybe she was just starting to feel it. This is ridiculous, she said under her breath. It is just a cable. No one corrected her. Not directly. But the silence that followed said enough. The man with the earpiece spoke again, his voice low. We have full confirmation, he said. Interference occurred during active transmission. That phrase hung in the air. Active transmission. That meant something had been moving through that line when she cut it. Not idle. Not dormant. Live. Maggie's eyes widened slightly. She caught that word. Transmission of what? She asked. The question came out quick, almost urgent. For the first time, she was asking something real. The man did not answer. He simply looked at her, then at the SUV, then back at her again. A silent direction. Maggie exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping just a fraction. The resistance was fading. Not because she agreed, but because she could feel the weight of something she did not understand. My phone buzzed again. I glanced down. A new notification. Session integrity restored. That wording stuck with me. Integrity. Not connection. Not signal. Something more important had been preserved. Which meant whatever she interrupted had not failed. It had just moved. Quietly. Seamlessly. Maggie took one step toward the SUV, then stopped again. She looked back at the cable one more time. That small piece of wire lying against my house. It looked ordinary. Harmless. Like something that could be replaced with a quick service call. But the way everyone else treated it told a different story. She saw that difference now. Too late. The man nearest the vehicle opened the rear door, holding it just enough to signal expectation, not force. Maggie hesitated again, then finally moved. Slow steps. Careful. Measured. Like the ground itself might shift under her. She paused just before reaching the door and turned toward me one last time. "What is this really about?" she asked. The question hung there, heavy, honest, and completely unanswered. I met her eyes, then glanced down at my phone, then back at her. "It was never just a cable," I said quietly. She held that look for a second longer, searching for something she could hold on to. She did not find it. The engine hum deepened slightly as she stepped closer to the vehicle. The door remained open. Waiting. And for the first time since this started, Maggie did not try to take control of the situation. She just stood there, on the edge of something she could not see, about to step into it. Maggie stood there for one last second, then ducked her head slightly and stepped into the SUV. The door closed with a soft, controlled thud. Not loud, but final. The kind of sound that does not invite second chances. The engine stayed low, steady, like it had been running long before it arrived. No urgency. No chaos. Just process. One of the men remained outside, eyes still on the cable, then on me. "We will need a brief statement from you," he said. His tone did not change. It never did. I nodded once. "Understood," I said. My voice felt grounded, but my thoughts were moving faster now. Too many details were lining up in ways I had never seen before. He stepped closer, just enough to keep the conversation contained. "When did you first notice the disruption?" he asked. "Immediately," I said. There was no delay. He gave a short nod, like that confirmed something already expected. "And prior to that, the connection was stable?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "No interruptions." He paused, then glanced at the house, then back at me. "You were actively engaged in a secure session?" he asked. That word again. Secure. Not private. Not remote. Secure. I felt the weight of it. "Yes," I said. He tapped something into a small device in his hand, then stopped. "That aligns with the system logs," he said quietly. "System logs. Not my logs. Not my hardware. Something else entirely." My phone buzzed again, softer this time, almost like a heartbeat. I glanced down. The secure session had not only been restored. It was still active. Running in the background. Untouched. That should not have been possible without manual recovery. But I had not done anything. Which meant the system had taken over long before I realized it. The man followed my glance for a second, then looked back at me. "You did not initiate the reroute," he said. It was not a question. "No," I replied. He nodded again, slower this time. That detail mattered. More than the cut itself. The second SUV engine idled slightly higher, then settled again. Inside, I could see Maggie through the tinted glass, barely visible. She was sitting still, hands in her lap, staring forward. No phone. No movement. Just waiting. That image stayed with me. The man near the utility box stood up and brushed his hands once, like he had finished reading something invisible. The line was a surface link, he said to the others. Primary traffic was already mirrored. Mirrored. That word hit differently. That meant everything that moved through that cable existed somewhere else at the same time. Not backup. Parallel. Redundant in real time. I felt a quiet shift inside my understanding. This was not a single connection. It was a network built to survive exactly this kind of interruption. Maggie had not stopped anything. She had only exposed it. The man with the tablet closed it and looked toward the SUV. "We are clear here," he said. The words were simple, but they carried closure. Not for the situation. Just for this location. One of them turned back to me. "You will be contacted for follow-up," he said. "Do not alter anything on your system." I nodded again. "I will not," I said. He held my gaze for a second longer, like he was measuring something beyond the words. Then he gave a slight nod and stepped back. No handshake. No formal close. Just completion. The man nearest the driver's side tapped twice on the roof of the SUV. A signal. The engine rose slightly, then steadied. The rear door stayed closed. Maggie did not come back out. Not yet. The second vehicle adjusted position slightly, aligning behind the first. Perfect spacing. Precise. The kind of coordination that does not happen by accident. My phone buzzed again. I looked down. A new message. Session continuation authorized. That meant the work I had been doing had not been cancelled. Not paused. Continued. As if nothing had happened. That realization settled deep. Whatever she interrupted was too important to stop. It simply moved around her. The first SUV began to roll forward slowly, tires barely making a sound against the pavement. The second followed without delay. Smooth. Controlled. No rush. Just departure. The street felt empty the second they cleared the corner. The engine hum faded quickly, like it had never been there. I stood there in the quiet, staring at the cut cable still lying against the side of my house. It looked smaller now. Less important. Just a piece of insulation in copper. But everything that had just happened said otherwise. I stepped closer and crouched down, looking at the clean edge where it had been severed. Too precise. Too confident. She had believed she was correcting something. Fixing something. But the system had not treated it like damage. It had treated it like interference. And it had responded accordingly. My phone buzzed one more time. I looked down. A final notification. Review pending. That word lingered. Review meant someone was still watching. Still analyzing. Still deciding what came next. I slowly stood back up and looked down the street where the SUVs had disappeared. The silence felt different now. Not empty. Observed. And whatever process had just started was not finished yet. I did not go back inside right away. The air felt different now. Quieter, but not empty. Like something was still listening. I stood there a moment longer, looking at the cable on the ground, then at the utility box, then at my phone. The screen stayed active. No signal bars. No carrier name. Still connected. That detail would not leave me alone. I finally stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The sound of the latch clicking felt louder than usual. I walked straight to my desk. The monitors were still on. The session window had not closed. It had simply shifted. A small line of text blinked at the bottom. Connection stabilized via alternate route. I leaned closer. That was not part of my setup. Not anything I configured. I moved the mouse slowly. The interface responded instantly. No lag. No packet loss. Cleaner than before. That should not have been possible after a physical cut. I opened the system panel and checked the routing logs. The primary path showed interruption at exactly the moment Maggie cut the line. Clean break. No signal degradation. Just gone. But below that, another line appeared. Secondary route engaged automatically. No delay. No handshake. Just transfer. That meant the system did not wait for failure. It predicted it. Or detected it faster than real time. I sat back slightly, letting that settle. I had worked with secure networks for years. I knew redundancy. I knew failover. This was different. This was layered in a way that did not show itself until something went wrong. I scrolled deeper into the logs. The timestamps were tight. Too tight. There was no gap between loss and reroute. Not even a fraction of a second. That meant both paths had been active at the same time. Mirrored. Exactly like the man outside said. I exhaled slowly, realizing I had only been seeing the surface of the system I was connected to. The cable outside was not the core. It was just the visible edge. My phone buzzed again on the desk. I picked it up. A new notification. Review initiated. That word again. It stayed on the screen longer than the others. I tapped it. Nothing opened. No details. Just acknowledgement. That meant the review was not for me. It was above my level. I set the phone down and looked back at the monitors. The secure session resumed without interruption. The other side had not even acknowledged the drop. Or maybe they had, and I just did not have clearance to see it. That thought sat heavier than anything else so far. If the system could hide a disruption like that, then it could hide a lot more. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling for a second. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No traffic. Outside. No voices. Just the low hum of the equipment around me. It felt isolated, but not alone. I turned back to the screen and opened the network map. It looked different now. Nodes I had never seen before were active. Paths that were usually hidden were now visible for a brief second, then gone again. Like the system was adjusting in real time. I tried to follow one of the routes, but it disappeared before I could trace it. That was not an error. That was intentional. My phone buzzed again. This time, a short message. Do not modify current configuration. Maintain session. That was not a suggestion. It was a directive. I did not recognize the sender. There was no number. Just the message. I read it twice, then set the phone down again. I had no reason to change anything anyway. The system was already doing more than I could. I glanced toward the front door. Still closed. Still quiet. But something about that silence felt temporary. Like the first wave had passed, and something else was already building behind it. I stood up and walked back toward the window. The street outside looked normal again. Empty. Still. Like nothing had happened. But I knew better now. I looked down at the spot where the cable lay. It was still there. Untouched. Waiting. A small piece of evidence that did not match the scale of the response it triggered. That contrast stayed with me. I rested my hand against the window frame and watched the empty road. The system inside was stable. The connection was stronger than before. And yet, everything felt less certain. Because now I knew there were layers I could not see. And someone was already reviewing what just happened. I did not sit back down right away. Something kept pulling me deeper into the logs, like there was more hidden just beneath the surface. I moved the cursor slowly, careful not to trigger anything I did not understand. The system felt different now. Not just stable. Aware. I opened the event timeline again and zoomed in on the exact second the line was cut. The timestamp was precise down to the millisecond. There it was. A clean interruption. Then something unexpected. A parallel log entry I had never seen before. It did not belong to my system. It carried a different signature. I hovered over it. Restricted. That label was new. I had never seen that on my interface. Not once. My finger tightened slightly on the mouse. That meant the system was exposing something it normally hid. Only because something had triggered it. I clicked it. Nothing opened. No access. Just a faint flicker, like the system acknowledged the request but refused to respond. I leaned closer to the screen. There was more. A series of micro-events stacked beneath the interruption. Not errors. Not warnings. Responses. Automated. Immediate. One line stood out. External validation received. That phrase sat there, simple but heavy. External meant outside my network. Outside my control. That aligned with what I saw on the street. The SUVs. The timing. It was all connected. I scrolled further. Another line appeared. Authority level override. My breath slowed. That was not part of any system I had clearance to see. That was something higher. Something that did not wait for permission. I sat back, staring at the screen, trying to process what that meant. Maggie did not just cut a cable. She triggered an override. The room felt colder. Not physically. Just the awareness of it. I reached for my phone again. Still active. Still connected. The secure session icon pulsed softly. Like a heartbeat. I opened the message log. The last entry remained the same. Review initiated. But now there was a new line beneath it. Classification pending. That was different. That meant the system had not finished deciding what this was. I set the phone down slowly. The quiet in the room stretched again. But now it felt heavier. Like layers were moving beyond what I could see. I turned back to the monitor and opened the network map again. This time I watched more carefully. The nodes flickered in and out. Some stable. Some hidden. But one node stayed active longer than the others. It pulsed once, then twice, then disappeared. It was not local. It was not even regional. I recognized the pattern. Government routing. High level. Not something that ever appeared on my screen. Not unless something forced it to. I swallowed slowly, realizing I had just seen a glimpse of something I was never meant to track. My hand hovered over the keyboard, but I did not type. The message earlier echoed in my mind. Do not modify current configuration. Maintain session. I listened. I stayed still. I let the system run. Because whatever was happening, it was not something I could improve. Only something I could interfere with. And I had already seen what happened when someone interfered. I glanced back toward the window again. The street was still empty. No headlights. No movement. Just shadows stretching across the pavement under the streetlights. Everything looked normal. But it was not. Not anymore. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up instantly this time. A new message. Inquiry scheduled. No time. No sender. Just that phrase. Inquiry meant follow-up. Not optional. Not informal. Structured. Official. I felt a slow pressure build in my chest. Not fear. Not exactly. Just the weight of being pulled deeper into something I had only touched the edges of. I looked back at the monitors. The session continued without pause. Data flowed clean. Smooth. Uninterrupted. As if the break never happened. But I knew better now. The system had absorbed the disruption. Redirected it. Classified it. And now, it was evaluating it. I leaned back slowly, eyes still on the screen. Every detail from tonight started to line up in my head. The timing. The response. The language they used. It was all too precise. Too rehearsed. Like this scenario had been anticipated long before it happened. Which meant one thing. This was not the first time something like this had occurred. That thought stayed with me longer than anything else. Because if the system was built to respond this fast, then it had been tested before. And somewhere out there, someone already knew exactly what this situation meant. I did not touch the keyboard for a long time. The system was still running, still stable, but now it felt like I was only a passenger inside it. I watched the network map pulse slowly, like it was breathing on its own. Then something changed. A new layer appeared for just a fraction of a second. Not fully visible. Not fully hidden. Just enough to be noticed. I leaned forward immediately. That was not normal behavior. The node flickered again, this time holding slightly longer. It carried a label I had never seen before. Not text. Just a numeric string. Too clean. Too precise. It did not belong to any civilian routing structure. I felt that detail settle deep. This was not just federal level. This was something higher in classification. I did not try to click it this time. I knew better. Instead, I watched. The node pulsed once, then split into two paths, then collapsed back into one. That movement was not random. It was decision-making. Live. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up instantly. A new message appeared. Coordination required. No sender. No context. Just that phrase. My grip tightened slightly. Coordination meant more than one system was involved now. This was expanding. I set the phone down slowly and looked back at the screen. The secure session window shifted again. A small line appeared at the top. External observer connected. I froze. That was not part of my interface. That meant someone else was now watching the same session I was. Not through me. Alongside me. I glanced around the room without thinking. The house was still silent. Nothing moved. But that line on the screen changed everything. I was not alone in this anymore. I moved the cursor slightly. The interface responded, but slower this time. Not lag. Something else. Like priority had shifted away from me. The system was no longer centered on my input. It was processing something larger. I opened the log again, scrolling past the entries I had already seen. New lines were appearing in real time. Not visible before. Not part of the original structure. One line caught my eye. Event classification escalated. I exhaled slowly. That confirmed it. Whatever Maggie triggered was no longer being treated as a simple disruption. It had crossed into something else. Something that required evaluation beyond automated response. I leaned back, letting the weight of that settle. Then I saw it. Another entry. Human review assigned. That was different. Everything until now had been system-driven. Automated. Immediate. But this meant someone was stepping in. Manually. Somewhere. Watching. Deciding. I felt a subtle shift in the room again. Not physical. Just awareness. Like the moment before a call comes in. My phone buzzed again. I looked down. Incoming secure call. No number. No location. Just the option to accept. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Then I answered. The line connected instantly. No static. No delay. Just silence. Controlled silence. Then a voice. Calm. Measured. Confirm your system is stable, it said. No introduction. No identification. I swallowed once. Yes, I said. System is stable. A brief pause. Then, confirm you did not initiate any rerouting protocols. That question landed heavier. I kept my voice steady. I did not, I said. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. Understood, the voice replied. Then silence again. Not disconnected. Just waiting. I felt my heartbeat slow, matching the stillness. You may receive additional instructions, the voice said finally. Do not alter your current configuration. Same directive as before. Reinforced. That meant this call was not just informational. It was control. I nodded instinctively, even though they could not see me. Understood, I said. The line went dead without warning. No goodbye. No confirmation tone. Just gone. I lowered the phone slowly and looked back at the screen. The external observer line was still there. Active. Watching. The logs continued to update. Quiet. Precise. I realized then that this was no longer about what had already happened. This was about what was about to happen next. And somewhere, someone was already making that decision. I kept the phone in my hand a second longer after the line went dead. The silence that followed felt heavier than the call itself. No tone. No disconnect sound. Just absence. I placed it slowly on the desk and looked back at the screen. The external observer line was still there. Active. Unblinking. That meant the call was not the end of it. It was just confirmation. I moved the cursor again, careful, slow. The system responded, but it did not feel like it belonged to me anymore. It felt shared. Or monitored. I opened the session window and checked the data stream. Everything was clean. Too clean. No jitter. No retries. It looked perfect. That was not normal after an interruption like that. Perfection meant control. I scrolled down to the lower panel. New entries were still appearing. Not many. Just enough to show movement. One line caught my attention. Directive channel established. That was new. I had never seen that phrase before. Not in any system I worked with. I hovered over it, but did not click. I already knew I would not have access. This layer was not for me. My phone buzzed again. Short. Sharp. I picked it up. A new message appeared. Prepare for continuity validation. I read it twice. Continuity meant they were not checking if the system was running. They were checking if it had been affected. That was different. That meant someone expected a deeper issue. I looked back at the monitors. The session continued without pause. But now I was not sure what normal even looked like anymore. I opened the process monitor and scanned the active threads. One stood out immediately. Unknown origin. Protected execution. That was not part of my environment. It was running alongside everything else, but I could not interact with it. I moved the cursor toward it, then stopped. The earlier message echoed in my head. Do not modify. I pulled my hand back slightly. Whatever that process was, it was not something I was meant to touch. A soft shift in the lighting caught my eye. I glanced toward the window. A car passed slowly at the end of the street, headlights sweeping across the houses, then gone. Everything looked normal again. Too normal. Like the neighborhood had already reset itself. I turned back to the screen. The unknown process pulsed once, then stabilized. Another log entry appeared. Integrity verification running. I exhaled slowly. That was the second time I had seen that word. Integrity. Not performance. Not connectivity. Something deeper. Something that measured whether the system had been compromised at all. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up faster this time. A short message. Stand by. That was it. No context. No timing. Just that. I set the phone down and leaned back slightly, eyes still locked on the monitors. The room felt tighter now. Not physically. Just the awareness of being inside something that was still unfolding. I checked the session window again. No alerts. No interruptions. But the external observer tag flickered once. Then again. Like a heartbeat that did not belong to me. I leaned forward, watching it closely. It held steady. Then a new line appeared beneath it. Secondary observer connected. My chest tightened slightly. That meant more than one point of oversight now. This was growing. Expanding beyond the initial response. I glanced at the logs again. The entries were more spaced now. Slower. More deliberate. That was not system behavior. That was human pacing. Someone was reading. Deciding. Updating. I felt that shift clearly. This was no longer automated escalation. This was controlled evaluation. My phone buzzed again. Louder this time. I picked it up instantly. A new message appeared. Validation phase commencing. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Then I looked back at the screen. The unknown process pulsed again, brighter this time. The network map flickered. Nodes shifted. Paths adjusted. Everything was moving at once, but in silence. No alerts. No warnings. Just change. I rested my hands on the desk, not touching anything. Not interfering. Just watching. Because whatever this phase was, it had already started. And I was not the one in control of it. The system did not spike when validation began. It slowed. That was the first thing I noticed. The network map stopped flickering and settled into a steady pattern, like it had reached a decision point. The unknown process dimmed slightly, then pulsed once, longer than before. Not a signal. A checkpoint. I leaned forward, watching every change. A new line appeared in the log. Continuity scan in progress. No percentages. No timer. Just the statement. That meant there was no simple way to measure it. The system was not checking speed or uptime. It was checking truth. I felt that word settle heavy in my mind. Truth of what the system was before the interruption, and what it was now. My phone stayed silent for a few seconds. That alone felt unusual. Then it buzzed again. Short. Controlled. I picked it up. Phase locked. That was all it said. I looked back at the screen. The external observer tag dimmed slightly, then stabilized again. The second observer remained active. Both present. Both watching. But neither interfering. That meant the system was now leading the process. Not them. I opened the deeper log layer again. This time, a new section appeared. It had not been there before. Restricted audit stream. My cursor hovered over it. I knew I would not get access. Still, I watched. Lines appeared one by one. Encrypted. Compressed. Unreadable. But their timing told a story. Each entry came in at precise intervals. Not random. Not reactive. Measured. Like a checklist being completed. I counted the intervals in my head. 3 seconds. Then 5. Then 2. Not uniform. That meant different subsystems were reporting independently. The system was comparing them. Cross-checking. Verifying alignment. I leaned back slightly, letting that sink in. This was not a recovery process. This was an investigation. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up faster now. Assessment nearing completion. I read it once. Then again. That meant a result was coming. Not a guess. Not a probability. A decision. I set the phone down and focused on the monitor. The unknown process brightened again. The network map shifted once more, but this time the movement was smaller. More precise. Like fine adjustments instead of broad changes. Then I saw it. A new node appeared briefly at the center of the map. It did not connect like the others. It did not route traffic. It simply observed. A core reference point. It stayed visible for less than a second, then vanished. But I knew what it meant. The system had established a baseline. A verified state. Everything else was being measured against it. I exhaled slowly, realizing how deep this went. The cable outside had never been the system. It was just an entry point. What mattered was what sat behind it. And that was still intact. My phone buzzed again. Louder this time. I picked it up immediately. Final verification in progress. The words felt heavier than the others. Final meant there was no next phase. Just outcome. I looked. Back at the logs. The audit stream sped up slightly. Entries came faster now. Not chaotic. Just compressed. Like the system was closing gaps. Filling in the last unknowns. Then everything paused. Not frozen. Just, still. The map held. The process dimmed. The observers stayed present. Waiting. I realized I was holding my breath. I let it out slowly, eyes locked on the screen. This was the moment everything resolved. Not loudly. Not visibly. Just internally. Then the log updated. One line. Clean. Absolute. Integrity confirmed. I felt the tension in my chest release slightly. The system had passed its own test. Whatever Maggie interrupted had not been compromised. It had adapted. Survived. Continued. But the screen did not clear. The observers did not disconnect. That meant something else was still pending. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up slowly this time. A new message appeared. Action pending. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Then I looked back at the monitor. The system was stable. Verified. Complete. And yet, whatever came next was not about the system anymore. The message did not change for a long time. Action pending stayed on my phone like it was waiting for something outside of the system. The monitors in front of me remained stable. Clean. Verified. Nothing moved unless it needed to. That was the first time all night the system felt complete. And yet, nothing was finished. I leaned back slowly, eyes moving between the phone and the screen. The external observer tags were still active. Both of them. They had not disconnected after the verification. That meant their role was not just to confirm integrity. They were still here for something else. I shifted slightly in my chair, listening to the quiet in the room. The hum of the equipment was steady. Constant. Almost too perfect. Then my phone buzzed again. I picked it up immediately. A new message replaced the last one. Action authorized. My breath slowed. That was it. The decision had been made. Somewhere beyond what I could see, someone had reviewed everything and reached a conclusion. I looked back at the monitor. The log updated at the exact same moment. Directive channel. Active. That phrase returned, but this time it carried weight. It was no longer just established. It was being used. A new line appeared beneath it. Field coordination initiated. I felt that one more than the others. Field meant physical. Not digital. Not contained inside the system. Something outside was about to move. I stood up without thinking and walked back toward the window. The street was still empty. Still quiet. But the silence felt thinner now. Like it was about to break. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Stand clear of external interactions. That wording was precise. Not stay inside. Not remain available. Stand clear. That meant something was about to happen nearby. I stepped back from the window slightly, just enough to stay out of direct view. The glass reflected my face faintly, but my eyes stayed on the street. Seconds passed. Then I heard it. Not loud. Not sudden. Just the low approach of engines again. Controlled. Familiar. The same sound from earlier, but this time there was no surprise. I watched as two vehicles turned onto the street again, slower than before. Same alignment. Same spacing. But this time, they did not stop at my house. They continued past, rolling steadily toward the corner. Toward Maggie's place. I felt that shift immediately. This was the next phase. Not investigation. Not validation. Action. The vehicles stopped in front of her house with the same precision as before. Doors opened in sequence. No rush. No hesitation. The same controlled movement. I could not hear voices from this distance, but I could see the structure of it. Positions taken. Focus directed. This was not a visit. This was execution of a decision already made. My phone buzzed again. I looked down. Observation only. That was the entire message. I did not move. I did not step outside. I just watched. The figures moved toward her front door, steady, deliberate. No raised voices. No visible tension. Just process. The porch light flicked on. A shadow moved behind the glass. Maggie. She was home. Or she had been returned. The door opened slowly. I could not hear what was said, but I saw her posture immediately. Different from before. Smaller. Still. Listening. The same men stood in front of her, calm, composed. No urgency. No argument. Just presence. That told me everything. Whatever was happening now, it was not a reaction. It was a conclusion. I felt the weight of that settle deeper than anything else tonight. Because this part had nothing to do with cables or signals or systems. This was about accountability. My phone buzzed one last time. I looked down. Case transfer complete. I read it twice. Then looked back at the street. The men were still there. Maggie stood in her doorway, frozen between stepping forward and stepping back. The moment stretched. Quiet. Final. And I realized this was the part no system log would ever show. I did not step outside. I stayed exactly where I was, half in shadow, watching through the glass as the moment settled into something final. Maggie stood in her doorway, the porch light casting a sharp line across her face. She looked smaller than before. Not physically. Just, diminished. The same woman who stood in my yard with bolt cutters now held the edge of her door like it was the only thing keeping her steady. The men in front of her did not move much. They did not need to. Their presence carried everything. One of them spoke. I could not hear the words, but I saw the shift in her posture immediately. Shoulders lowered. Chin dipped slightly. Not submission. Realization. The kind that comes too late to change anything. She stepped back, just enough to open the door wider. That single motion said more than any argument could. They did not rush in. They did not push past her. They waited. Then moved together, controlled, precise. Inside. The door stayed open for a few seconds after they entered. I could see the light from her hallway stretch across the floor, then shift as shadows moved through it. Then the door closed. Soft. Final. The street went quiet again. No raised voices. No sudden movement. Just silence settling back into place like nothing had happened. But everything had. I exhaled slowly, realizing I had been holding my breath again. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. Monitoring concluded. That was it. No follow-up. No instructions. Just closure. I lifted my eyes back to her house. The porch light was still on. The windows glowed faintly. Nothing moved behind them now. Whatever conversation was happening inside, it was contained. Structured. Final. I turned slightly and looked back at my monitors through the reflection in the glass. The system was still running. Clean. Stable. Untouched. The external observer tags were gone. Both of them. Disconnected without notice. Like they had never been there. The logs had stopped updating. No new entries. No hidden layers surfacing. Just a complete, sealed record of what had already occurred. I stepped back from the window and walked slowly to my desk. The room felt different now. Lighter. Not because anything had been resolved for me, but because the system had finished what it needed to do. I sat down and looked at the screen one more time. The secure session had ended quietly. No alert. No message. Just a return to idle. Like the system knew its work here was done. I rested my hands on the desk and stared at the interface. Everything looked normal again. Exactly like it had before tonight. But I knew that was not true. I knew what sat behind it now. The layers. The redundancy. The oversight. It had always been there. I just had not seen it. My phone stayed silent this time. No more messages. No more instructions. Just stillness. I leaned back in my chair and let the quiet settle in. Outside, the streetlights hummed faintly. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed, then faded away. The neighborhood had returned to its routine. Lawns. Driveways. Quiet nights. Like nothing had ever been disrupted. But one house down the street held a different story now. One that would not be explained in HOA meetings or neighborhood newsletters. I stood up again and walked back to the window, just once more. Maggie's porch light turned off. The house went dark. Completely dark. That detail stayed with me longer than anything else. Not because it was dramatic. But because it was quiet. Deliberate. Like a line had been drawn and closed behind it. I looked down at the spot where the cable still lay against my wall. I had not touched it. I did not need to. The system had already moved beyond it. I rested my hand against the window frame and stared out into the empty street. This was never about fixing a line. It was about understanding what that line really connected to. And now I did. I turned away from the window slowly, letting the reflection fade behind me. Because some systems do not break when you cut them. They just show you how little you actually see.